right, we'll go ahead and call the work session to order. We'll skip over the roll call. On the consent items, are there any items anybody wants to discuss? All right, seeing no lights, we'll move on to new business. First item is instruction. Is there anything on the federal programs? There's a copy of the budget. Anybody have any questions? All right. We'll move on to advanced placement courses. Anything on those? See no lights? This will be quick. Does everyone just want that? Do people want that to be under consent? Well, it includes some things that we have talked about in the past as far as like money and those items. Pay for tests, how much it costs for books, classes. I'll just say I don't want it under consent for myself. I won't be voting for some of it because I think that I would like to hear from staff what we want as far as 3s, 4s, and 5s. I think that's our goal. And from the numbers, it looks like we're at, what, about 25%?
Go ahead.
Somewhere between 25 and 28, pretty much on that. But I also think on that we haven't had every student taking the assessments because they've had to pay for it themselves.
And do you think it would make a difference on the passing rate if you had every student taking it?
I think it would improve it because I'm assuming, and I wish Anita was here, and I'm sorry I didn't think to ask her about this today, if she included every student in that pass rate, even if they didn't take the test, you know?
No.
I should have asked that question today, and I apologize, I did not. Overall, will it necessarily improve every student? No, ma'am, I don't think every student it will improve. Improving instruction is what is going to improve the pass rate and raising the rigor of those classes.
So are you saying that the classes that we offer right now aren't to the rigor that they need to be for students to get a 3, 4, or 5?
I'm thinking we need to push the envelope more, but that's the case across the curriculum. I don't care what subject it is. We need to increase our rigor.
So do you think it might be wise then for us to focus on improving the rigor in the curriculum in the classes that we've had for the last several years as opposed to adding new subjects?
I don't necessarily think adding the new subjects is a negative for us. I think one of the big things is making sure the teachers get the training and then really following up to making sure that the instruction is happening within the classroom like it needs to be and that we're getting the practice in writing that we need to be getting there.
So do y'all have a plan for that as far as how you're going to improve on the practice? Do y'all offer a practice AP exam?
Most of our teachers do a practice AP, yes ma'am. Most of those are self-scored. I don't think I don't think we're paying to send the test off to be scored by a company. That's definitely something that we could look at trying to incorporate into our PLCs to bring the AP teachers together, look at student work across the curriculum. That's something that I'll work with the new secondary supervisor to make sure we get that in place.
Okay. Any other questions from any board members? We can move on to,
Sorry.
Mr. Moore.
Yeah, thank you. You had mentioned, and I'm looking through it again, maybe I missed it, about the paying for the classes. Where is that included in there? Or is that the recommendation coming out of that? Did I miss that part?
I don't know that that's in the recommendation, but that is under the copy of the costs.
What it would cost?
It'd be about $66,000, I think.
Yeah, in addition of the other ones would be an additional $13,950 if you guys wanted to cover costs 100% of all students taking the AP course. So the total cost altogether would be $79,950.
Someone can refresh my memory. I thought we'd already voted on that. Did we not?
Well, this is for a new budget year, so I mean, we talked about it for last budget year, but we never
We never
approved
actually
it
approved it,
No.
okay.
because we didn't have any money in fund balance at that point.
Okay.
And Chair Parker, there is a possibility that that cost on the testing could be reduced, because the state does give us money back on students who are eligible for free and reduced price.
Right.
We just don't know going in how many students that would be, so we just estimated the cost on the full cost of the testing.
Right. I guess one question I would also have is, I know some of these, it looks like there are not teachers that are trained in some of these classes. They would need to be trained over the summer, I guess.
Yes, ma'am. We have a few teachers that will be attending training this summer. I think out of all of the courses that they're requesting, there's only one teacher who will not be trained this summer. She had a daughter getting married, and she will be attending training next summer, according to the information I received from her principal.
And you still think we should offer that class?
I think if the teacher has the ability, that would be okay. Yes, ma'am. She has to submit her curriculum to AP. They have to approve it. Again, if we can coordinate with the other AP teachers to support one another, I think it's good experience, and then we can build on that.
I would just say that I want these students to get the best experience that
Yes,
they possibly can, and I am familiar with the rigor that's required to take AP exams for teachers and for students, and I cannot imagine having taken an AP test from a teacher, from a class that the teacher did not attend the AP training, just because it is that rigorous. I mean, we're asking them to teach a college level course. We're not asking them to teach 12th grade algebra 12th grade calculus.
Yes, ma'am.
And I guess all these classes have been on the list as far as what students can sign up for.
Yes, ma'am. They're all in the master schedule on the schools right now.
Okay. Ms. Powers?
I'm not an educator, but I see a pattern that we spend money on things that we're not fully ready to execute well, and this seems to fit in that pattern, that we jump ahead sometimes to things that aren't well thought out. But so that's my opinion.
All right, we can move on to parking and consumable fees. Any questions on that? All right, I'll go ahead and say it. This is my 4th year on the board, so this is my 4th time dealing with this. I don't understand why it would cost me more to park at Santa Fe than it cost me to park at Central. I don't get it.
Yes, ma'am, and I ask every principal to be here tonight to discuss that with you, because they're the ones who determine their fees and their parking structures. They did ask that. Some of them told me that they have smaller parking lots, so therefore they have less maintenance on those parking lots. But some of them are at Tinsrow, so they were not able to be here tonight, but I did ask them all to be here tonight to have this conversation.
I think it goes back to systemic and systematic, and these parking fees and consumable fees just aren't systemic and systematic to me. When it costs me less as a 10th grader at Central to park than it does as a 10th grader at another school, I just don't understand it. Mr. Pennings?
I believe we asked last year during the budget session and talking about this, that all the schools charge the same for parking instead of all over the board. In fact, I'm 99% sure we did make that request.
And what I was told by the principals is they came together and came up with a maximum amount to charge for their parking fees. Again, some schools just didn't feel like they needed as much money as others. I wish I could give you better information than that. We did consider deferring this until next month when more of them were able to be here, but that puts the vote on it right at the start of the school year, so that was the reason we went ahead and included it on this agenda.
Will they be able to be here for the board meeting? Okay. Ms. Kinzer?
I'm going to say what I said last year when they were here. All of them were here, and Hampshire principal and Spring Hill, all of them, and they all agreed together as to what their parking, what was necessary. Every one of those schools do fundraisers, so this is not funding anything that isn't needed. I think we're micromanaging to say to them what we think it ought to be. If they agree and they've met together as principals and they don't have a problem with it, then I'm okay with it. I think it's in their realm.
I mean, I guess I'll just bring up, I think, again, for the last 4 years, same thing we talked about. I mean, I'll just pick out Spring Hill High School because we're short on parking at the time. So we're charging a parking fee. We don't even have room for people to park. And it's including other things, paper costs. And I just have a fundamental problem with calling it one thing when it's not that thing.
I believe the consumable fee is for the paper costs, not to include the
Oh,
parking in
did I?
that. I'm sorry.
No, it says in here.
I mean, it says, so you're saying it shouldn't be included in that?
They're two different fees.
I understand that.
They're discussing two different fees there. One's a consumable fee and one's a parking.
And I'm reading under the listing of parking fee, unless I'm missing something there. That includes car tags or decals, student activities, student ID badges, printer, extra costs. Am I reading that wrong?
No, you're not.
Thank you. I mean, again, I just fundamentally, we've got a school that has a parking issue. I would fully understand that if parking fees went towards making sure there's enough room for parking or making sure there was parking being taken care of. But it's generally, from what we've seen in the past, it's in other things is what it goes towards, student activities. We need a student activities fee, that's fine, but call it that.
In looking at this, it looks like the schools that are charging the $20 parking fee are charging the $10 consumable. The schools that are charging the $20, the $10 parking fee are charging $20 consumable. That they've just flipped it. So it looks like they're putting their money where they think they need that money. It's $30 at all schools. It's consistent. So I agree with Ms. Kinzer on this. I think we're micromanaging.
I don't think it's completely different though, because if you don't drive, you're not paying the parking fee. And that's the difference. I would imagine if you're a student, you always pay the consumable fee. Am I correct?
Yes, ma'am. All students are asked to pay the consumable fee with the exception of students who qualify for free and reduced lunch.
I feel like if we want to say it's $30 at each of the schools, let's just say it's $30 and say parking and consumable. I mean, I just don't understand why we got to flip-flop them. I imagine the cost for a decal is about the same at either school. And I don't think this is really micromanaging just because they ask us to approve it every year. So we made the same request for the last 4 years. And you recognize that, don't you, Ms. Miller? Because you've been here for all 4 of those years when we've had this discussion.
Yes, ma'am, and I've had this discussion
With
myself.
them?
So, I mean, if you want me to take it back to them and say we need to make it a $30 parking/consumable fee and not separate it out, I'll be glad to do that. I can, again, go back and try to get them to come to one fee for parking. I think they moved forward with this year because you all agreed with it last year to do the maximum charge, and that was what their thought was with asking for the same thing this year.
Mr. Pennings?
Well, I don't agree to micromanaging, and I agree with Ms. Kinzer and Ms. Morency, but it's not micromanaging when we have constituents call us up and say, how come they can park for such and such a fee at that school and I got to pay such and such a fee at this school? Then it becomes part of our job to find out why and try to fix that. And that's what been happening. And that's why last year we said, please bring us the same parking cost for each school.
All right, seeing no other lights, we'll move on to parallel education.
You all had received today some survey results. I have hard copies if anybody needs those and didn't get those by email. But the Parallel Education, which is the company that does our substitute staffing, that contract is up for renewal on September 1. We're recommending that we renew that contract, and we base that on 3 factors. The first was fill rates for this year compared to what we had the year before without the company. Also the survey results as well as the cost. So I have does anyone need hard copies of those? We summarize the surveys. I have the actual surveys here if anybody does want to look at those, but we did do a summary of the surveys We did get back 63 surveys this time instead of 6 for last time. And you'll see the results summarized as well as the comments. The comments are really important to us as well as to Parallel as far as improvements and that sort of thing.
I am not prepared to vote on this anytime soon until we have a budget and see where it is. It's expensive, and we may go forward. I'm not saying there, but I would not put this on the consent at all. I don't think until we have a firm budget and where it fits in that we could vote on. I could vote on it.
To kind of summarize the cost, and this is just a generalization, but we had about $190,000 in fees. With that, though, we saved around $98,000, $70,000 in FICA and Medicare that we would have had to pay. eSchool, which is our software system that people go in to do their absences and subs can sign up. We don't have to pay for that anymore. They absorb the cost for that. That was $16,000. Workers' comp reduced by $1,975, almost $2,000. Drug tests that we did not have to do, $6,700, and $3,800 for background checks. So about $98,000 offset those fee costs, as well as the rent that they pay us for using our office space. And then they also gave us about $2,250 back for existing subs that they hired that we already had on staff.
I did receive this today, and I did read over it, and, you know, from a management and systems perspective, it sounds like everyone's pleased. There was very little comment about the quality of the subs in the classroom, and from the feedback I've gotten from in the classroom, I think there's a lot to be desired. I'm glad we're not voting on it, because I think we need to get more information, but I'm appalled at some of the stuff that's acceptable by a substitute teacher. So I hope that we expect better than what we're getting in the classroom, directly touching our kids.
Where are we on billing for Parallel? I think when we've been talking about the budget, we've heard that we're way over budget when it comes to subs as far as what we had allocated this budget season versus what we've are having to pay out. What's the difference in that?
You're talking about on the salary line?
Well, this year, just what's the overage?
Karen can probably answer that better than I can. I know we're caught up, I think, April's bill, and we're now processing May's bill, or we're waiting on May's bill to process. So, to my knowledge, we've paid up through April. Is that right? All that I deal with the fees part of it. The fees is the extra cost that comes out of my budget, and that has been about $190. That would be including May.
So without May?
The parallel fees they're not something that's under my budget, but just in looking at accounts overall, we still have May to come in, but I think we're about 80-some thousand over in that line item right now from what was budgeted.
And I'm not so sure that that's an overage, or just maybe that budget amount wasn't enough. But you also have to take into account we're filling classrooms. If you look at our fill rates, they've increased. And so we are paying out more because we have more subs in the classrooms instead of empty classrooms. So that accounts for some of that overage.
Do you have the numbers for how much we pay for subs when we have teachers that are out for PD training, Discovery Ed, all of that?
We can get that data and break that down for you, yes.
Okay. I think I'd asked Dr. Marzak for that in the past multiple times. So that would be helpful when we look at this particular contract, I think, because we're paying them a premium, as I understand the contract, the way it's written now, and we already know that we're going to have X number of teachers out on certain days. I think one of the notes I saw in the comments was that Parallel's really good about letting people know when it's going to be a high fill rate day, and I can only assume that that's because we know that we're going to have teachers that are going to be out for Discovery Ed or whatnot, and she's shaking her head. So I think we're putting a lot more pressure on ourselves as a system, but we're also paying a premium for that service.
That is some of that, the PD, but I know, and Amber's here, she's the one that sends those out, those messages, hey, we're going to have a high fill rate. In the month of May, you'll see we had a lot of subs out. When it got pretty on Fridays, they took off. I mean, they were going in and they were putting in personal days that maybe they haven't taken throughout the year, that sort of thing. So some of that is PD, and we can plan for that. A lot of this, though, we can't because it's just subs taking off. But we'll be glad to get you that breakdown of the reasons why they're out and how many and per school and all of that.
Are there any internal controls that y'all have to look at? Who is filling, I think we had said before, one of the things we wanted to avoid was having teachers filling classes on their planning period.
Mm-hmm.
Do we have a decrease in that amount as far as what we're paying teachers? that
Yes, we
fill?
still have some of that happening. I'm trying to let the administrators know that's for an emergency only. That should be if a sub calls out sick.
Okay.
We do have teachers still volunteering. Hey, I know so-and-so is going to be out, and I'll be glad to take their class. So we've got to work on that with the administrators, getting a handle on that. But to my knowledge, that has decreased compared to what it was prior to parallel.
So you can get us that information?
Yes.
Okay.
Mhm.
And do you know how much we paid this year versus last year on all accounts? Like, if we're talking about not just instruction accounts, but I know special ed has to have subs in each of the different departments, CTE, how that affects them and
We
what
can
their
break that
numbers
down
are.
because that's how they actually pay the bill. So we can break that down for you.
Okay. And as parallel, do y'all have any limits on the amount of hours that subs work?
Yes, they don't work over 40 hours in a week, so they're not getting overtime.
Okay. Any other questions? All right, we'll move on to finance. And before we get into what's on the list, I wanted to go ahead and talk about the budget. And Ms. Kinzer had asked me to put this on here for us to discuss, and I think this is as good a time as any, considering the discussion that just came up about parallel. So I'll turn it over to Ms. Kinzer.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Pennings and Mr. Beaver and I attended the County Commission meeting last week, and as you all know, the budget has been sent back. We all knew it would. It wasn't realistic at all to think that they could fund it be 70 cents on the tax rate to do so. The revenue that we can count on is $99,529,848, with the possibility of an additional $440,649. That's what I wrote down that night, which would make us right at, with revenue, $100,240,680. What I'd like to charge this board to do, because they're the professionals, they're the ones that know what is needed, work on. We've got Ms. Gagliano who's done a great job with the budget. I would like to charge them with providing us a revenue-neutral budget. Go back to last year's budget, $96 million. We have some additional funds we'll have this year, a little over $2 million. And they go back to their departments, they go back to the principals, and they just bring us back a revenue-neutral budget. Now, I don't know how, at this point, that we need to be hiring new personnel, because there's so many things up in arms. We don't know if we're going to have a reduction of staff or a reduction of positions. And I don't want to use the term freeze, but that's kind of what needs to happen until you can present us with a revenue-neutral budget that we can look at and we can maybe approve. Now, within that budget, there's some things that are given. There has been an increase in benefits. Ms. Gagliano sent those to me today. They weren't as big as we thought initially, and I don't have them in front of me right now, but they were just like 3% on something and 1.5 on another, but that's a given. Those increases. The other thing that's in there is that for the first time, the state has said whatever money comes to you in raises has to be used for a raise. And you know I push for a 2%, but I know that we would have to look at maybe some other options, that we might have to look at giving a one-time, like we did in 2015. That might be possible. It might be possible to just give licensed personnel a one-time. I don't want to throw a figure out, but let's just say $500. Then maybe you might look at the support personnel maybe getting a little less than that. That might be one way that you could meet the state's obligation and still use the money for what it's been earmarked to be used. I think that we cannot afford a Cadillac or a Mercedes or a Bentley. We have got to get back to driving a good vehicle that can provide an education for our kids and get them there. So there are a lot of cars that can get you there that don't have all the bells and whistles on them. I think we're up in the air about diploma. I think we're up in the air about a lot of the software we're going. And I'd have a question: why do we really need Skyward if we're going to the 81 Act? Do we really need Allaview if we're going to the 81 Act? If our finances are not even being under our control. So I'm asking you as board members to ask them, charge them to do some work on this. And I'm asking you too that we need to also prioritize what we think needs to be in this budget. And yes, it's not our job to do the budget really, but we do have priorities and needs that we think are really important. So in the next 24 hours, if we agree to do it like this, and you would have the opportunity to send those priorities to Dr. Marzak or to Karen. And then they would know how to work on it. And then maybe next week we can give them some time to go back to their departments, to go back to reality. You're talking $15 million over what we have the revenue for doing. And there's not going to be any more revenue. They've already set the tax rate. Let's be realistic. It is done. 2-point-whatever million more that we're going to get, that's great. That's great. And it will probably cover a lot of what we need to do going forward. But we really are going to have to tighten our belts, and we need to look to you guys as the professionals as to how we're going to do that. So that's what I'm asking you all. Can we ask them to do this? We can't. It's not a vote. I just want to know what you all think.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Well, I disagree. We're once again allowing the county commission to micromanage the budget of the school system. Sure, we might not get 115 million, but asking us to go back to 99 million is ridiculous. We got students without books that they refuse to fund. We got a one-to-one program that is being drug out till 2005 or something, because they don't want to fund adequate monies for it. School maintenance is going to drop back down to where we were prior to 2 or 3 years ago, where our schools are falling apart. And it's all because this board will not stand firm on budget requests. I mean, we've done this year after year. We cave in to the commissioners just because it's election year. If they don't have enough guts to stand up and put forward a tax increase to pay for the education of the kids, we're never going to make progress in this county. And so I ask that we can find some cuts, I'm sure, but I certainly don't want us going back to 99 million. I don't even know what the maintenance of effort was. I don't know if the 99 million covers it or not, but it's ridiculous. As far as raises for our employees, if the county employees are getting 2% raises, our people deserve raises along the same range. And the only way we're going to be able to do that is for this board to stand firm.
Well, I don't think we can stand firm at 115 million. We're not going to get that if we sit here until January and keep the kids out of school. It's just not going to happen. They asked us to have a expenditure to be the same as the revenue. What they asked us. They said they would give us $1 million for the plans for Spring Hill High School. They would give us $1 million for the plans for McDowell. And I think it was $265,000 for the roof at Spring Hill High School. That's almost what they demanded we do. That wasn't really a suggestion. I'd like to see us make some cuts, because I'm sure we can. I would not like to see our classes increase. I don't want to see anything taken away from students that we have now to improve their education. And I would like to see some programs added to add on. What we need to do is go to the programs, and I totally agree, programs that are not working, or we don't need anymore, let's cut them. I mean, even if you cut a program or we're under contract yet, you have to pay out something, but you're saving something. You're still saving something. We're going to have to make some cuts, as much as it hurts me, but we're going to have to. The county commission's in a real tight fix right now too. They've got the landfill that is going to cost them a bundle. 'Cause I sat through that meeting last week too. It's going to cost them a bundle, and they're caught between a rock and a hard place, just like we are a lot of times. But I don't think we should do anything that's going to affect our students detrimentally in any way.
Mr. Beaver?
No. I just want to clarify something. I don't want to do anything to hurt students either. And I think that it was a good school year this year with a $96 million budget, 2.5 or whatever it is over that. I think we can provide a great education for these kids and continue to. The capital budget that the commission approved was $14 million for EMG and $2 million for us to do architectural plans and planning for Spring Hill High School and McDowell, if we name it that way. And then it was for the parking and for the buses. And so I thought that was a real win for us. Mr. Pennings was there, Mr. Beaver was there. But I'm not asking that we don't offer anything but the great education that we offered this year, Tommy. But I can tell you, $15 million over what the revenue is, it's not going to happen. So we've got to be realistic. We've got to, and these are the people that can go, they're the professionals, and they can help us to get to the point where we can pass a budget that we can take to the commission and justify the expenses that are in it. That's all I'm asking. I don't want to take anything away from classrooms, and you know how I feel about that 2% raise. I don't want it to go away. I want to take care of it, and they passed the budget for the cafeteria, 2% raises in that. They have a 2%. So yes, I want to see that happen. But I also want to get real. I want us to not go and just spend this money. This needs to happen in the classroom. It doesn't need to be all these extras, and maybe there's personnel, I don't know. But I think we need to go to a revenue neutral budget. Tell us what we can do to have the good year and provide the good education we provided this year on that budget, and we've got over $2 million more we can add to it. That's what I'm talking about.
Ms. Morency?
I'd like to see us look at our classroom sizes and the number of teachers that we're carrying in all of our schools, each one of our schools. If we're overstaffed, I think that's with good faith with the commission. We can at least see, they can at least see that we are trying within the system itself to get a handle on our staffing. If we're overstaffed, I know we're hiring a lot, and I agree that we shouldn't be hiring if we're overstaffed in some areas in some schools. And if those teachers can be put in other schools where they are hiring for those positions. And when you start looking at your staff and cutting staff, you're also cutting benefits, and that will help this budget greatly.
Thank you, ma'am. Well, I agree with Miss Betty. You know, I sat down this weekend and I went through this budget, and there's a lot of fluff in this $115 million. And you know, I feel that, you know, that we do need to get real about what we're doing, because, you know, we know that the county is in a bind this year for everything that they got to commit to. And you know, when we go to them with this kind of budget, we're not taking in consideration the taxpayers. And so, you know, I think it, like Miss Betty said, you know, we need to go to the zero neutral budget, and that gives us where that we can get a handle on what is going on in the budget, because when we first looked at this, I mean, it was unrealistic. And so, you know, I think it gives us a good starting place. And it might take us 3 or 4 nights or 2 weeks. I don't know, you know. But I think we need to get a handle on what's going on.
Sure. Ms. Gagliano, from your standpoint, what kind of time do you need before, or what kind of direction do you need from us in order for us to come back together? I know there'd been some discussion about having a budget meeting, but I think one of the things that you're hearing is that unless y'all want us to go budget by budget and cut, or can y'all do that process ahead of time?
Probably, if I can just make a few general comments on what's been commented already, and then I can kind of give you an idea of what we talked about today.
Yeah.
For one thing, with the revenue budget, you know, we put together a revenue projection early on, and then right before our meeting the other night, we sort of did an updated one. So if we were allowed to use that updated one, we could add approximately $700,000 to our revenue. I think it's very realistic because the sales tax amounts that I raised it up to are what we're seeing right now. So I think it's, you know, it's not a pie in the sky. It's reality now. So I'm pretty sure we would get the same thing next year. I don't think we'll go down. So if we can raise the revenue, that'll help us a little bit. On the expenditure side, one thing I wanted to kind of adjust your thinking on, we can't really start with the budget we have this year, because remember, we used a lot of fund balance. And some of the things are optional, but some of them are not. They're contracts that you've committed to. So right out of the chute, we can't start at the 96. We have to adjust up a little bit. And so we're going to have to find the money for that if those services are going to continue. So then the BEP is another piece of it. And I've spoken to the financial person at the state, and there's actually kind of 3 parts to it. One is the minimum salary schedule at the state. Your salary schedule has to be at that minimum for base year, year 6, and year 11, and everything in between. So our FY18 salary schedule meets that minimum. So with nothing done to it, it meets the minimum. Then there's another piece of it that says, do we have to put more money towards salaries? And on our BEP cover sheet, it says 0. So we're okay there. Then the third part is we have a matching requirement with the BEP, and so far you've satisfied that. The last thing is the 2% raise. And what that how it's been explained to me is, as long as you use the amount of money that the BEP generates for professional salaries, and that includes teachers, guidance counselors, principals, everybody that's considered professional, whatever that BEP generates, as long as you include that much in the budget, you're covered. So if someone didn't have that much, that's where they'd have to add to their salaries. So we're in a position where we wouldn't necessarily have to give an increase to meet the standards. So I just wanted to give you that information. I'm not saying we shouldn't give an increase, don't misread me. But as far as being pressed to, you're not. So, did I leave anything
No.
out?
Ms. Gagnon, I'm sorry if I interrupt, but it was my understanding that Representative Charles Sarge from Franklin put forth a thing in the legislature saying that those funds had to be used, no matter where we fall.
Right. Well, if you look at what is generated in our BEP calculation, the amount that, there's a figure that's generated, and then a percentage of that is actually granted to us. It's like 70.45%. That figure right there is the figure that we have to include in salaries. And we have surpassed that figure in FY18 salaries. So through various emails, purposely in writing today to the state, I confirmed that because I just wanted to make sure we were starting the whole thing correctly.
So in essence, you're saying we would take the money for salaries and not use them for salaries?
We are already using it for salaries, so what I'm saying is we're not required to increase it. We've already met the standard for how much it generates because not all of your teachers are in the BEP.
Right.
So the amounts that are in there, they generate enough. So just another piece of information in this giant puzzle we're working through. As far as what we need as a team, we need some direction from you, and I think we've gotten some of it tonight. Some of the tasks will take some time. The class size thing will take some time. And really, the largest portion of the budget is salaries. So there are other areas we can look at. You mentioned some software, you mentioned diploma, you mentioned some capital or, some issues, some outside issues like that are sort of outside of instruction. So those areas we can look at as well. We've got roughly a month or a little bit less now.
Yeah.
So I guess whenever, and then we've got people out of town on vacation, so probably it's either like we have a meeting this week, which is probably too soon, or we have a meeting 2 weeks from now.
And I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
Sure.
Yeah,
So go.
yeah.
And so really what we need is a number you guys are comfortable with. So the county commission approved 99,529,848. We did make a plea at the meeting to budget property tax and sales tax a little higher at what it should come in because what it's currently tracking for now, which going back to what Ms. Kinzer said was about an additional $711,462. So if we were allowed to budget that on the front end, that means that we're looking to go to the county commission with a budget of $100,241,310. We can either budget that on the front end or do what we've done for the last 2 years, which is after that property tax and sales tax money rolls into fund balance, we then use that to buy one-time things that they wouldn't allow us to budget for on the front end. So we have one of two ways of doing it, but what we need is a number. So then we need to go back, and that gives us the opportunity to look at options that we can bring to you guys for voting on. So we need a number that you guys are comfortable with.
You just gave it.
Which one? 100, 241, 310?
241, 310.
Okay.
That's my opinion.
Unless you want to go, unless you also want to figure into that 2% raise beyond that, which you guys know going back to the stuff that we've done is about $1.4 million.
No, my expectation is it would be in there.
The 2% raise
Yes,
would
sir.
be in there.
Yes, sir, because you're getting BEP funds, and, it's like getting money for Christmas and just saying, I don't know, that's not a good analogy, but
But
I just cannot imagine that you would tell our teachers that we're going to have a $100 million budget, and there's not going to be any increase from that. How could you even define that to them, that the state is giving some money for raises, but we're not going to give them to you because we got this $100 million budget, and we're nothing in there for teacher raises? No, that's
Well,
not acceptable.
if you guys want to include that, then we'll include that. And that's
I
what
personally
we'll
wanna
go
include
from.
that.
But that direction from you guys about what you want included would be greatly beneficial.
What's the dollar figure on the amount of the increase for health insurance per teacher, if you can?
We would have to get that for you, but the annual increase is 3%. So because we're only half a year fiscal, we already know the first half, and the second half would be 1.5%. So roughly around 8,000 is an average payout that the board pays out per person. So 1.5% on that.
Thank you. I agree with you, Ms. Kinzer, but actually, if we're not increasing what we're charging the teacher for their insurance, we're giving them a 1.5% increase just by not passing on the increase for their insurance that it costs us. I mean, reality is reality, and I agree with you. I wish we could give our teachers 5-10% raise. They deserve it. But we're looking at reality here, too. And I would say let's do a budget with the 2% in, but let's not forget that 2% is actually 3.5%. And 2% raise increases what we have to pay per teacher for workman's comp, for Social Security, for Medicare. The higher their wages go, the higher our cost goes for all of that. And that's just reality. And I'm sorry, but I mean, I live in the real world.
I just want to chime in on one thing about that. I think our teachers live in the real world, and I am okay with us maybe not providing them the raise that we wanted to provide them if we're providing them all the resources that they need to do their job. And it's my understanding that that hasn't occurred in any of our previous 96 million, 98, 99, whatever $1 million budget you want to, almost $100 million budget. We're still not giving our teachers and our students the resources that they need to be successful. And until that's done, I'm going to have a really hard time approving any budget, period. Mr. Moore?
I was just going to say, personally, while I like the idea of being able to give a raise, it's everything's on the table as far as I'm concerned. We're having to cut a lot of stuff to get it from 115 down to 100 million or 99 or whatever it is. So I just want to make sure those numbers are able to be separated out if they need to be. And as far as I'm concerned, almost everything's going to need to be able to be separated out at this point because we may need to move some things around when whatever you bring us anyway. So we're into a lot of pieces to move.
Thank you. And that's the reason I say I think we need to go back to what our budget was last year, and then we get a reality check on what is actually in this budget that we need this year, and try to separate the fluff from the needs. Thank you.
Could you, Ms. Gagliano, as you all look at this, we know what a 2%, we know 1.4, but if we considered just a flat rate for licensed personnel, $500 is just, I'm using that figure, that would mean that the higher salaries are not being multiplied by 2%, so it's not as much money that we're spending for any kind of addition. That means each licensed employee would get X amount of dollars more a year, each one the same. And could we get a cost factor on that and see if that would be an option?
Are you thinking more like a bonus that doesn't alter?
I was thinking it would be added to their salary, so it would be recurring. I mean, you would add $500 to their salary, and then the next year that would be their salary. That's what we did in 2015.
So you'd be altering the salary schedule by $500?
Yes.
Across the board?
Yes.
Okay.
Now, now that you mentioned salary schedule, it's very inexpensive what we wanted to do to the beginning. And I would hope that would stay because that, by the $1,200
right,
that we discussed.
Right. I was just going to ask for a working document kind of set up. Would it be helpful to have like FY18 rates and then have a column that says this is what we're adding here? or in buckets of, we kind of did that with the budget impact summary where we added, the initiatives and different things too. So I'm just trying to think of what would be the best for working through it. Something like the budget impact summary, but then married to the regular budget document somehow.
Mr. Moore?
And again, while I appreciate what Ms. Kinzer's asking for, I'm still going to be in the category that everything's on the table about there's things we may want to do. I don't envy you guys in the next few days of what you got to do on this. And I would encourage, I've looked at the budget and really tried to look at it. And the hard part I have is while I may feel like intrinsically there's some fluff in there, I don't know how to pick it out. Especially not $15 million worth.
Mm-hmm.
And the problem I have with going back, and again, Mr. Beaver, I appreciate your comments on that, because that's the struggle I have with going back is kind of twofold of looking at last year. One, I still think we're doing some things wrong, so I'm not even sure if that helps us. I think that's, we're still got some things we haven't fixed yet. And two, I know I harp on the maintenance side of things, but I think when you brought up I think Ms. Gagliano brought up the fact that we've traditionally, and that for decades, have relied on fund balance to kind of artificially create a budget that has just never been realistic. Every year that our budget's been one thing, it's what we call it, but it's never really been that. We've been supplementing that with fund balance for decades.
Mm-hmm.
And it has created kind of the mess we're in now as we try to transition away from that. Partially, as Mr. Bates would say, since they took away some pennies, we're being forced to transition away because we no longer have fund balance in large sums showing up. I think, unfortunately, the county commission still isn't quite realizing what that is. The $4 million that I wanted to include, which again may end up getting cut, which I hate, but the reality is it's still going to cost $4 million to do it. Whether we include it in that budget or we have to piece things together or we have a boiler or chiller or whatever large $1 million piece of equipment goes out, we've still got to come up with it somewhere. So, I think, Mr. Beaver, that's probably the only way we can do is get back to kind of last year. That's kind of a starting point. I don't know what else to do either. I think that's realistic, but we have to understand that even that isn't going to get us a perfect answer, even too close. We're still going to have to do some digging in and find out what to do on it on that. But I think this was kind of the growing pains we're going to have to as we transition. I think we're headed the right direction in getting the right numbers in the budget, and we still got some work to do. But the mess we've had for decades and how this has been done has kind of created this for us.
Well, and again, we can't let the county commission keeps harping on maintenance of effort. They don't want to give us any more than they gave us last year, because that means they have to give us that amount again next year. And commissioners don't want to do a tax raise, but I tell you, I don't know how many cars there are in Murray County. But I've been talking to them for 3 years about raising the car,
Wheel tax.
the wheel tax. Well, we have to go to the state to do that. So why didn't you go to the state? You've had 3 years to do it. You just figure if they raise the wheel tax by $10 per car in Murray County. I know just in the little housing development I live in, there's got to be 500 cars. And now that's, but again, it's an election year. We don't want to do anything that would keep us from being reelected.
I would ask that if we're going to start with last year's budget, that you also include in that any of the fund balance monies that we used. Yes, and so that's what,
102.
102?
Mm-hmm.
So that's where we would be starting with a 102 balance. 102 budget. $102 million budget. So we wouldn't be starting with a $96 million budget. We'd be starting with the 102.
I'll give you an exact number here in just a second.
Wasn't 500,000 of that, though, the grant, so that was an in and out? Part of that 102 was the grant for 500,000?
Yeah,
So that wouldn't be something again.
Yeah, I can provide a complete breakdown of, the other thing that's a little bit different in the number we're starting with in FY19 is we've included a lot of the grants that when you started the year in FY18 you didn't budget for. You didn't budget for them until they came in with a budget amendment. So that's a little bit different too. There's a lot of non-comparable items from budget to budget, but I can lay them out, like how much of it was grants and how much of it was the rest. But I wanted to say something about the maintenance of effort. I've dealt with this before, and one strategy that's been used, while it's not ideal for the school district, it is another way to get some items funded. And two things are not included in maintenance of effort, and that is capital expenditures and debt. And so in the other district I was in, we had a memorandum of understanding with the city, for example, that they were going to give us X amount of dollars in a year towards our technology, for example. And the memorandum of understanding was included in with the paperwork. So when the state did their calculations for maintenance of effort, those items were not included in the calculation, and the city or the county in this case would not be committed to spending that same amount of money the next year. It was a one-time thing. But it was a way for us to pay for some of our technology in a one-time shot. And after the meeting the other night, I did offer that information to one of the commissioners, and they thanked me and said, but we don't have any money anyway, so. But anyway, I just wanted to throw it out there, that that was an option.
I think you just summed it up, that thank you, but we don't have any money anyways. Like, I think there's value in what every person has said here tonight. There are lots of ideas. There's lots of ways to approach this. At the end of the day, I think there's value in living within our means. I think it's also good to have a wish list of where we would like to go. But in speaking to what's the word that you use, Ms. Kinzer? A balanced or revenue neutral budget. I think there's a lot of value that we all start making that our goal. I do agree. I think there's some fluff in our budget, as Mr. Moore said. I don't know that I'm qualified to find it, but I do believe it's there. Knowing that 80% of our budget goes to salary, I really appreciated Ms. Morency's statement asking that y'all start getting numbers to our staff. I have a question though. Are we hiring right now? Are we hiring anyone right now?
We do have positions posted. We have hired for some positions, but, you know, if we're going to look at numbers, staffing, and possibly a moratorium or a freeze, of course, that would stop.
Okay, I could not advocate for that enough. We do not need to hire one person until, I know in a previous meeting we used the phrase right size our staff. Mm-hmm. That is absolutely imperative. If we have 80% of our budget in salaries and we have one person too many, that's a sizable sum of money. And maybe some of these positions could be filled with those people. But I have a lot of concerns if we are hiring anyone, and then once we get these numbers back, if come July or August, someone's going to lose their job on a dime. Like, we have to right size our staff. We have to get this in check. But to think that we are going to terminate someone with no notice while we are hiring people right now, that is something that I think we could not take more seriously.
No, and I agree. I mean, that's just bad business practice. You don't want to hire someone and then have to turn around in August and say, go home. Right now, we do have 69 vacancies posted that have not been hired for. So if we were have to look at staffing and that sort of thing, then, you know, we've got places we can fill. Now we have to look at the specific positions, because based on endorsements and those type things, there are some positions we're still going to have to hire for. But we have definitely looked at what our vacancies are, and we will definitely look at where we need to right sizes. I think you've heard them talk about. And then as soon as we make a determination on either a moratorium or who to hire, then we'll put that in place. But I share the same thoughts as you. I don't want to hire somebody now and then tell them in August you don't have a job, or in July.
Yeah, we had a conversation about this at 1 o'clock today.
But it
about
did-
getting ready for the budget meeting, like what are some things we need to focus on and work on? And that was one of the things we talked about as a potential hiring freeze. But the question we were wondering, which kind of from you guys is we need a number, is to determine what's that number. So where do we need to go from there to determine how we right-size the district from there? But we've had those same conversations.
Okay, but there are two different things. I mean, one, we shouldn't hire people if we're,
Agreed.
until we're sure that we can't move someone around. But I think it's within reason for us to consider that we have too many people on staff now, and that is gonna need to be addressed. And these are people, like, who need to pay their notes and feed their family. So I take that seriously.
Agreed.
But as Kristen mentioned Ms. Parker mentioned in a previous meeting, you know, we're here to serve the kids and to serve them as well as possible. And these are part of running a healthy business that we need to get in check. And we need to live within our means and find a way to make this a neutral budget.
I just want to say I agree with the idea of right-sizing the district. I think that's the direction that we've been trying to look at over the last couple of months. That has been mentioned, I think, at pretty much every meeting that we've been at. The problem I will say I have is that last year on the first day of school, I happened to go to a Mexican restaurant, and the two people that I happened to see there that I knew, both their kids did not have a teacher in the classroom on the first day of school. And that's unacceptable too.
Yeah.
So I don't want to hire teachers that aren't going to have a job August 2nd. But that's why this needs to be done, and it really should have been done yesterday, in my opinion, as far as looking at what our district needs and what we need to serve the number of kids that we have. And, I mean, I don't know that we can do that. I mean, I think we've all said that we're not qualified to do that. So we really need y'all to do that job. And it's not going to be a fun job, I don't think, but it's a necessary job that has to be done. And I don't think it just has to be done at the school level. I think it has to be done in central office as well. I think that was something else that was mentioned by county commissioners, that supervisors and the pay that they receive and all of those things have to be looked at. I mean, I know this past year, I think in Ms. Miller, in your department with Dr. Woodard, y'all lost like 2 people during the year. And I think you and Ms. Skaggs were doing the work of 4 people, which is asking a lot. But at the same time, if you guys were able to do the work of 2 people, do we need to hire 2 people, or do we need to hire 1 person, or do we need to hire half a person? What really works? Because if you guys were able to do the work, it may not be ideal for y'all, but you know, maybe we pay you guys a little bit more to do your job as opposed to bringing in somebody else, paying benefits and those type of things. Those are the things I think you guys have got to look at. But if the work of 4 can be done by 2, then I'm going to guess that probably occurs other places in central office.
And they're not looking to replace 2 positions. They're only looking to replace 1. So,
Right.
And I understand. I totally understand.
So going forward, I guess do y'all have enough to go forward to work on something so we can meet? You said you can't meet next week, so in 2 weeks? You're okay to meet next week? Are the board members okay to meet next week?
I won't be here next week.
Can you call in?
Depends on the day. I'll be in Florida for the week for family vacation, but it depends on the day.
Okay.
How much time could we look at like Thursday of next week? That'd give you a little more than a week.
I think the 2 people that are going to be working on the staffing piece are Amanda and Ron, so maybe we need to ask them what their schedule's like. Thursday's okay?
Thursday.
Okay.
What do board members?
I just don't want to wait too long on this, in all honesty, but I don't know that we will have the numbers that we need to be able to meet Tuesday, Wednesday, or Thursday of this week. So if we don't have those numbers, I'm not coming here to sit here and talk about numbers that y'all haven't worked on. I mean, so.
Ms. Parker, I would just want to back you up on that if you don't mind. I don't care what the date is. I'll make it work one way or another. I just, as long as you guys get the number to what we're shooting for the target here.
Yep.
I don't want to make it so soon that you guys can't, because it's a lot of work y'all got to put in on this. So, however soon you can have it is fine with me as a board member.
Well, we have the number 100,241,310. So now we go backwards from there and we present ideas and scenarios. And then we bring those ideas and scenarios and you guys make a decision, yes, want to do that, no, don't want to do this, fund this, don't fund that. So we bring those scenarios and we'll have them there. But, I mean, yeah, we've got to get to a zero sum. And there's a lot of things that were asked for and asked to be put into the budget this year that we then need to decide, yes, that stays or no, that doesn't. So.
Ms. Morency?
I agree with David that everything's on the table. Therefore, I'd like to ask you, and this is just for an instance, an example, like books. If you could separate out K through 2, then out of that amount, and then out of that, what it would cost to do the English across the school district, then the other was math across the school district, and then the class sets for the rest of them. And so that we know, when we look at it, we know exactly what we're looking at. And I'd like as many of those as we can, where there's a flat amount, where we can separate those out so that we know what we're looking at.
Mr. Beaver?
Thank you, ma'am. One thing is, I think we need to do, and I think we've already said this, is to get back to the neutral budget, revenue neutral budget, is to make sure we got our salaries and hiring froze, and let's start from there. And then if we need to, let's just go line item by line item with each supervisor, and they justify their budget, and then, we got a handle on what's needed, and that, I know it's gonna take some time, but, that way we get back to what we feel is actually needed. If a supervisor can justify it, then we put it in and go, or we take it out and go.
I just want to clarify one thing on what I'm looking for out of this. I would expect to see a budget come back that it's at the $101 million number with a list of things that were removed and what those things cost. And then I guess as a board, if we feel like pushing above that, what I don't want, or what I would not be looking to do, is have a number that starts at the 115 and has a list of things that we all have to pick and choose from. I don't want to spend 3 hours here doing that. I would expect if the board's direction tonight is to go to that 101 number, or whatever we decide that is we brought that with a pile of other things that if we choose as a board to go above that, that's our choice at that point. I think that would be a more reasonable and more expedient way to conduct that.
Just in thinking about this while you were talking, I would feel better if Dr. Marzak was here. I think if we wait, give us next week to work on it, and we'll have our marching orders while he's gone, and then we would have time the next week to get it together. It could be the middle of the week or whatever, but don't you think that would be better?
Yeah, that'd be good.
So maybe Thursday's too soon next week,
I agree.
if that's okay.
One other comment about that, though. If once you get something and you post the budget meeting, which would be in the next week, our board will be meeting on that Monday. We'd meet sometime, and that way it would be posted so the stakeholders could be able to view it as well.
Yeah, it'd have to be posted by this Friday afternoon in order to hit next Thursday. And we could still revise, but it would have to be posted by the end of the week.
No, I agree it needs to go over to when you're back. Whatever you all.
Let me just say, though, the one downside that I see to that is that on here, we've got some things that are going to need to be funded for the next school year that will have to go. We will have to decide whether we want that in the budget or not. And at this point, I don't know that we can approve hardly any of these things for the next budget year. So that might make the Monday meeting very, very short. because I don't know that we have money for Alley View at this point without seeing what the full budget is for fiscal year 19. So if we want to make it that Tuesday or Wednesday afterwards, I just think that that may mean that we are going to have to take some of these things off for the 25th. I'm just curious from supervisors though that are in here. I mean, do y'all know what you would consider to be fluff? Do you know where you want to cut already in your budget? Or did some of you already cut your fluff because they're pretty much exactly what you had the year before?
I mean,
That's
Dr.
my budget. My budget is
That was yours, Lisa? Okay.
But I mean, because of you having to pull out a fund balance, I mean, that's, catching up to that right there is the tough thing, the tough circumstance we're in. Some of that it was one time and cannot be, if you choose not to repeat it, but a lot of it's recurring. So,
And some of the increases kind of going back, staying increased diesel fuel. Because his concern is as it gets closer to $3 a gallon, that we may have problems next year. Ms. Gagliano and I talked today about the Trustees Commission and the unemployment fringe benefits. Trustees Commission, she recommended increasing the budget by $235,000 because as more money comes in, they need to handle more of our money. They're going to start charging us more to handle our own money. And then the unemployment fringe benefits, that's where we pay out when people retire. She recommended increasing that by $100,000. So there are some overall increases that are quite large that are impacting the budget as well. So I asked Ms. Gagliano point blank today, would you recommend dropping that $414,000 increase to the Trustees Commission? She said no, because as more BEP money comes in, as more property tax comes in, as more sales tax comes in, they charge us to process all that information. So it's just going to cost us more money.
Will it cost more when we're under the new Consolidated Act?
That's a great question. I have no idea. It's a
Because
really
if
good question.
if they're the ones that are handling it, I don't know.
But the act could not, we're looking at an 18-month implementation.
Correct.
Potentially. It could be July 1 of 2019, maybe July 1 of 2020 before it gets implemented, determining the hiring of the finance director.
Right.
And they said, in the meantime, we still have to do all these things. So we still have to track our expenditures by location. We still have to process things through Skyward. So we would really need to be talking about those things for in the FY20 budget, based on when the new finance director comes in and the conversations we have potentially this winter or this spring moving forward. One of the things I did inform the county commission about is, even though you're taking over the finance, you still have to comply by federal and state education guidelines. So under the Every Student Succeeds Act, where you have to break out expenditures by location, you guys are still going to have to do that. You can't not comply with that federal regulation. And right now, Alley is one of the only few software programs that's doing that. So things that the new finance, that's why we met with Doug Laconin 2 weeks ago to try to get an idea of where the county was and then where we are moving forward in this whole Murray County Financial Act transition. So a lot of moving pieces and parts, if you will.
So you're not telling us anything that we can save at this point after meeting with Doug?
I mean,
Because I will tell you that when I met with Doug, he was saying that he thought that the county could save $150,000 from this.
On what?
On this plan,
On-
moving this in this direction.
Yeah.
And he also told me we would probably not have to pay any more money to VACO, which is a huge savings
Oh,
for
that's
all of
huge
us at this
savings.
point.
Yeah, huge savings.
I mean, that alone probably will take our budget from what we paid this.
102
Subtract
to
millions of
probably
dollars.
about 102 to probably about 1016, about 600,000 less. Yeah. So yeah, but it's already built in. So kind of going back to the two things that we kind of talked about at the beginning of the budget season was either rolling back initiatives or right-sizing the district. Those are pretty much the two areas where we can save
And/or
money.
both.
Do what?
And/or
or
both.
both. Exactly. And/or both. If you guys want to roll back diploma, we can do that.
I think that's where we're at.
Yeah. If you
I
guys
mean, I would
want to
just
do
say
that,
for
we can
me-
do that.
For me,
No.
especially considering the fact that Mr. Carver's not going to be here anymore, that's a major concern to me. Because when we went forward with diploma, one of the things that we talked about was having somebody that was going to be over the technology side of it, the curriculum side of it. and we've got a vacancy there.
Yes.
And we had a very qualified person in that position that you touted for at least 6 months before he actually came on board.
Yes, ma'am.
So it's really difficult to see how we're going to just bring somebody in and be able to hit the ground running in that particular program.
Well, the plan is in place. The strategic objectives are in place. The new person coming in would just need to take those plans and those strategic objectives and put them into motion. So we already have the foundation set up. They just need to pick the ball up and carry it from there. So we don't have to go all the way back to the drawing board, run everything back, and start all over again. Luckily, that committee set all of those things up and set that in place. And you guys with voting to implement those strategic initiatives, we've got them there. Now somebody just has to come in, pick them up, and run with them. That's the key thing.
Well, I think we had somebody that was really qualified to be able to do that. And so I'm kind of confused on why we're not moving further along
Yes.
at this point. And that's just one position. That's, over $90,000 that I feel like we can save the district if we don't hire that position. And so that's another position in central office that can go away.
Yeah. But, and still reminding the board to looking back at the FY19 general fund expenditures by function, central office is only at 5.98% of the overall budget. That's it, which is going down to 5%, dropping down 0.98% means we're on a skeleton crew.
If you're going to ask teachers to work and not get a raise or not get any extra money and not get any extra supplies, then I think I'm okay with that, asking central office to do that.
Okay.
That's where I stand right now.
Understandable. Okay.
Mr. Pennings.
It's like Mr. Moore said, though, as far as diploma is concerned. That's why we need your recommendations. How much will we save if we freeze diploma where it is? At this point, like Mr. Moore says, everything is on the table, and that means everything.
Well, not freeze diploma, get rid of diploma. Defund it completely and move that money over to something else, if that's what you guys want to do, if that's where you want to go. If you want to go strictly paper, pencil, and TN-ready test prep, we can do that. If that's where, going back to rolling back initiatives or right-sizing the district, if that's where this board wants to go, then that's a recommendation that is on the table.
Well, I fought too long to start getting things like diploma. I would not be in favor of doing away with it.
Agreed.
Mr. Carver, would we have to just completely walk away from diploma at this point based on where you're leaving it? Even from a funding stream, what would you say to that? I know that one of the things you had hoped for was to have a perpetual funding stream, and I know that we're not quite there with that, but do we have to expand? Can we retract, or are we okay to stay where we are?
I do believe the foundation has been set. I do believe that, I think I made mention last time I was before you that teachers have been working to create digital portfolios so they could show evidence with the TIMSS rubrics. So I think there is a foundational piece in place for the staff to move forward. The kicker is the business plan with the perpetual protected funding stream. And I do believe that based on what I know to be true right now, I do believe that if at all possible, you started down a path that I think it'd take a long time to move away from and move back to. If at all possible, if the fifth grade, the rising fifth grade, if that could happen and you could maintain for a year, then you could kind of get your a business plan in place. I think if I remind the board that there's three revenue streams that you would put towards a one-to-one. One of the revenue streams is retasking funds you already have in your existing budget. You don't buy paper, you don't buy toners, you go all digital, so there is a cost savings there. The other, this is an election year as far as the governors are concerned. I've been reaching out to the gubernatorial candidates because in some states there has been a state funding mechanism for technology. And in the state of Tennessee, they've taken a step that way in providing the lease program, which that honestly, guys, that's a pretty good deal. I might note that the original rental program was on a month-to-month rental program with the state of Tennessee, right? But Mr. Wolliver, I'd have to reach out to you, but it's my understanding in the MOU that we signed, the county wanted a 3-year commitment, and so that kind of took the month-to-month off the table. Is that a true statement? Okay. So I guess I read that in the tea leaves that the county is in favor of providing the devices to the kids. The other funding stream that I talked about earlier in talking with Senator Hensley early on is looking at an increase of a half penny for the sales tax in Murray County. And I think I've shared with the board members, I've shared with Dr. Marzak that if that were to go forward, that half penny retail sales tax, and the various municipalities would agree to it, that would generate $5.4 million annually towards technology and towards the technology department. And to be honest with you, that's what we did in Iowa, is we had a penny sales tax that funded it. So I guess on the front end side, there's 3 ways that we could continue it. The problem we're in right now is we're in a pickle for the next 12 months. You guys are in a pickle. And so I think, I guess, I still believe in the Dr. Marzak's vision. I still believe in the vision of the board that going digital is the way to go. I think if you were not to go forward with the $300,000 and you rolled that back, it would create chaos throughout the district, because you would have kids in 5th grade, some of them would have devices, some of them would not have devices, because the thing that has been promised is that if a kid got diploma certified, they would have that device for the 3 years of the rental agreement. Sometimes when my children were young, I didn't buy new clothes so I could provide my kids with the things that they needed. And so maybe we're kind of in that pickle right now in that, and I will tell you that, continuing diploma forward, in the event that, Ms. Powers, you made mention that we're laying folks off or reduction in force, that will be a tough one for you guys as well as administration. But in my heart of hearts, I believe that you guys have started on a good path. I think Dr. Marzak has pointed you all in a good direction. The kicker is the funding problem. And again, with what has been promised to the children of the district, Mount Pleasant High School will be in a good shape because the graduating seniors are going to have their devices deployed to the 8th graders rising. So, that will be okay. I know Ms. Tidwell, she was excited that both the 2nd and the 3rd grade would have diploma devices. If that other allocation does not go forward, that does not happen. Whitthorne Middle School, they're going to have, there's a group of kids moving through Whitthorne, I think there's 400 and some, that their teachers taught with diploma last year, but they wouldn't this year because of the numbers. It's a pickle. But I guess my recommendation to the board would be, you've already started this direction. If at all possible, you could go forward with the $300K and getting those other 1,300 devices online. My recommendation would be during the next 12 months then to work on those other funding opportunities, either through the county. And the county commissioners I've talked with individually, there's not a one of them that haven't said that providing kids with digital devices is not the way to go. It is an election year. And so there is concern about being reelected, but there are funding streams that could be explored. I know Dr. Marzak has talked, we've talked about businesses sponsoring kids with computers or providing a funding mechanism for kids. I think that might be, remember I said we're here, we want to get here, and we got to go with an interim step, right? That might be a great interim step to bring more devices into the district, but I do think you got to be careful because you all represent all the children. And, you know, if devices are going to come online, there's the deployment plan that I've had in place, I would hope that you would continue that forward so that it comes in waves. Otherwise, you could have a situation where one of the campuses could have everything they wanted and another of the campuses have to wait 2 or 3 years. And that's not fair. I do believe going in, I think I've shared with you before too, the graduation years, instead of looking at buildings, look at the class of 2022 or look at the class of 2025. That should be the focus and not, you know, my building gets it, I think that's the only way you're going to go forward with multiple campuses. So Ms. Parker, I don't know if I answered your question or not, but.
Well, if we decide to drop the diploma program, we need to go back and look at our mission statement because we're not preparing the students for life.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, dropping the diploma would be about like saying we're going to go back and just teach half our kids how to read and write, and others we just don't care about.
I would just ask, before we get too much further as a board and kind of looking at each of these, I really am kind of more interested in letting the staff figure out what prioritize this stuff, and then we can kind of pick it apart from there, which I expect we'll do anyway. But I'm really interested to see what they bring us on this without any too much further direction tonight.
Oh, Ms. Powers, I'm sorry. So sorry. I think I just had a reflex that turned this light on because when it comes to like why I ran for this seat, it was because I felt like as a non-educator, but someone that was involved in the school, I saw the teachers get tons of like education because we were going to do this program. And then, we changed directions. We went another direction, and I thought it was tremendously inefficient. And I think I just heard our superintendent just say, you know, what do y'all want to do? Do y'all want to jump ship on diploma? Like that even, like, I'm looking to you. Like, you are the captain of this ship, but that, like, you just kind of, I feel like it got a wee bit suggested that you're waiting to hear what we want to do on this. Like, we have spent a ton of money. Like, it's in our strategic plan. Like, I think we were all in. I really don't think that was a divided vote that we were moving forward on that, and that you just said, oh, I'm going to wait and hear what y'all want to do. Like, that would be the most inefficient financial decision, and it's not in the best interest of kids. So from a management standpoint, like, I expect you to figure out how to navigate this mess, and it is a mess. We jumped all in, and we don't have a good plan of how we're going to get down the stream.
Yeah, exactly.
But please don't ask this board if we want to jump ship on this, because I don't think any of us do. And I'm looking to you as a manager to solve this, please.
Well, with some members of the board saying we're all in and some members of the board saying everything's on the table, that's where I need direction from. If I bring something, is somebody going to say, why did you put that in there? That's not something I even want to consider or wanted to look at. So I need to gauge the board to see where you guys are to determine to what I bring back so that I'm not wasting your time.
Well, you know, I reached out trying to meet with you, and these are some of the things on my list.
Okay.
But I never heard back from you.
And that's
But
why.
see, I'm still on this board.
And that's why it's good to have the board together to get this feedback from the board.
Dr. Marzak,
so that I know where
you
we
meet
are.
with people individually, and I specifically asked you to meet with me,
Okay.
and you refused. But these are some of the things on my list.
Okay.
I think going forward, you may not have clear direction as far as what everybody wants, but I think you have about 2 weeks to meet with individual board members and find out what maybe their direction is, and then maybe put something together. So I think we talked about meeting after the Monday board meeting, so maybe would that Thursday work? Or is that's putting it close to the end of June. So that's not much time.
If we did it earlier in the week, then that would give us a little bit more towards the end, Tuesday, the 26th. Would that work?
What was that, Karen? I guess my main concern, though, is that if you're going to be gone most of next week and we have to get this thing posted, that really doesn't give y'all that much time to get this stuff ironed out. But I'm fine with that if that's, but y'all may need to be pulling some all-nighters here in the next couple of days.
Yep.
Is what that means to get it posted. We can meet on that Tuesday if that works for everybody. I don't really like meeting back to back, but if that's what we need to do, we can do that.
If we met on the Thursday, what is that, the 28th?
28th.
Then you could post it on Monday. I mean, you know, it'd give you a little bit more time. I don't like back-to-back either, but I mean, I'll be here, I'll do whatever.
What about Wednesday, the 27th?
That'd be fine. I prefer that.
When's the commission want it back to them?
The commission did not give us a return date.
This is our fiscal year, 2018, which is going to start July 1st.
Yes, ma'am.
So if we meet on the 27th, y'all.
It'll be a continuing budget if we start the 1st of July anyway. I mean, you'll be on a continuing budget until you have a budget. So you're asking for a neutral revenue budget, so you're just going forward with the same budget.
All right.
The 27th?
27th work for everybody?
6 o'clock?
All right. So moving on to Allaview contract. Ms. Gagliano, do you want to speak to that? Or does anybody have any questions specifically on that? I don't see any lights. Did you have anything you wanted to say about it, Ms. Gagliano? No. Okay. Update on the finance positions. Anything anybody wants to ask questions about? All right. Any question on the budget amendments? It looks like the monthly financials will come before the next meeting. Anything on the budget amendments?
Going back to Allaview, we can't really vote on that until I don't think you could put that on the consent. Any of those expenditures, we can't vote on any of that.
No, I don't think so.
So, do you want to talk in support? How you need it?
I think we had talked about possibly pulling that at least until July, just because if we're not going to meet until after.
We're actually using the services of Allaview daily as we're developing this budget. I think that it's critical in going forward as far as they were going to continue the work on the budget with us and extend it down to the principals, giving each of the principals a dashboard with their accounts, and then working through this whole location requirement from the state. Their contract technically ends June 30th, so we were trying to be proactive and have it start July 1, but I understand what your dilemma is. I do think that the work we're doing with them is good, and as we move forward with, we have a lot of processes to study and put in place in the central office, and they were going to assist us with that. I think I've outlined that all in the cover letter for Allevue. But if you have any specific questions, I can answer them. I mean, I can talk to them about the impact of a lapse of time, but we are working with them daily especially as we revamp this budget again.
Ms. Morency.
So if, and I don't know who suggested it, but if the department heads were going to come to us and talk to us about what their needs were in the budget and what their needs were and what they were asking for, would this be one of the things that you held out for?
For me personally, it's in my budget, it's in the fiscal
Right.
budget, and I would say that the work that you've begun with it, we've sort of put a lot of time and effort into it in this year's budget development. So if we walk away now, we'll just have to go back to the old way, I guess, but I would like to see it continue if at all possible. To me, they're an unusual resource because they're basically almost available 24 hours a day. If you have a question, I've been working till midnight with them several nights in a row on our budget. They really go above and beyond, and they do know their stuff. So I would love to have the resource if we can afford it.
Do people want it to go under? I gather from your comment that, Ms. Kinzer, that it probably shouldn't go under consent. I mean, I can see why not. We at least have the discussion, unless we want to have the right now. I mean, that's really what this is for. So if we don't want to have the discussion right now, we can put it under consent, or we can have it at the board meeting.
I don't particularly object to it. Certainly what she says makes a lot of sense and that it's being used. I guess I'm just saying that anything that involves money that has to be utilized out of the 2018-19 budget, we can't make that decision until we have a budget. That's all I'm talking about.
All right. I tend to agree with Ms. Kinzer on that. I don't know where everybody else feels about it, but it may be helpful if you can reach out to Allevue and see what the lapse means, and then we can discuss it at the board meeting if we want to. But without that information, I don't know that we're going to be able to do much more than maybe defer it to the next month. What a lapse would mean if we're not able to approve it at the June meeting.
Another thing we can do too is maybe approve the concept of it if the funding is available.
Contingent upon funding.
Yeah. So they see that our intentions are there. If the funding's not available, then it's not available. And most of our contracts are written that way anyway. If the funding's not available, we have an out. So maybe something to consider.
Okay. Ms. Gagliano, on the budget amendments on 7114, I didn't see that one included. It was revenue funds added, transportation. Is that in a different section?
I believe that one got pulled. Stan,
Okay.
did that one get pulled? The transportation budget amendment?
It did, yes. We've got to do a little more work on it.
Okay.
We did it, and then we got the end of May, yeah, this is June, end of May report, and we found there's a couple things we need to change. we're under the impression that we can get that changed and back to you before the board meeting. So,
Okay.
yeah, it's just we need to make a few adjustments to it.
Okay. And I don't have any objection to it coming back to us before the board meeting, but if there's no questions on these particular ones, I would like to move these to consent, unless there's any objection from board members on that. Okay.
Thanks.
And same thing with the rescinded one, if there's no objections to that.
Just a cleanup.
Right. All right, sounds good. So we'll move on. I think that covers all of this. We'll move on to annual superintendent evaluation.
This is just a placeholder for the board meeting. So far, one person has filled out the survey. So as soon as the board members could fill out the survey and get that back to me. And Mr. Dudley, I believe I gave you the paper copy. So if you could get that back to me, and then I'll have it disaggregated for the board meeting.
All right, strategic plan survey results.
So what you see posted are the 3 safety survey results, as well as the school board community evaluation survey results. So we'll be loading the safety survey results to the website. Sent that information to Ms. Doddridge to load. But if you have any questions, all 4 of the surveys are there.
I was just curious. I know when the budget process happened, I know I got an all call, I think as a parent, about the budget process, but I don't recall as a parent ever getting anything about the survey.
Okay, I'll talk to Ms. Doddridge.
To see if that was done.
Yeah, I'll see if she can find the, she has the ability to go back in the database with the all call out system and see when calls were done, if calls were done. So I'll double check with her.
Okay. Anything about the survey results? I will just, our school board survey is on there, so I think we may want to pull that up and look at that, because there's definitely some things that we may want to talk about at this point about what we want to look at improving upon. I will say, without some context, it's kind of hard on these particular surveys to know if it's, you know, who it was, what schools they came from, that kind of thing. If, you know, we're not addressing the needs at Spring Hill, or we're not addressing the needs at McDowell, or we're not addressing the needs at Culleoka, or, you know, we definitely deal with some hot button issues, so it's a little difficult to kind of put some context to this, at least for me, to be able to move forward. But I would like for us to look at this at some point and see how we can improve. I mean, I think that's the whole purpose of this. Does anybody have any ideas about how to look at how, if you want to look at this? Or
Ms. Parker, I would agree with you on this. I've tried to look at this, and it's just hard to. I mean, I see some areas that potentially it's hard to put it in context. It really is, without knowing kind of specifically what, if there's a specific issue at the time of the survey that maybe was driving certain answers. I don't know. I mean, as a board member, I would be more than happy to try to figure out how we could improve. I think that was why we all kind of wanted to get into this. But if somebody could help me figure out what we need to improve, I'd love to hear it.
is there a place where they can provide comments?
No, ma'am. This was strictly a Likert scale survey. Either strongly disagree, neutral, agree, or strongly agree. And then for the student safety results, it was yes, no, not sure. So that's all that was offered.
Is it not possible to add a comment section on the survey?
For the surveys are already closed. We could do that
Right.
for next year's surveys, but these surveys are already closed, already done.
I mean, without comments, I don't really know that we can move forward on any of this. I mean, I think that's kind of it was a waste of your time in some ways, without us being able to have some kind of feedback on, for somebody to provide why they strongly agreed or strongly disagreed on a particular answer. I don't want to be unreceptive to it, but I just don't know where we go on this unless anybody else has a crystal ball.
Well, what
Or
we're
can we
going
not
to do,
redo the survey and add a comment section?
can do it, but they need to be relaunched in sometime probably in August after school starts back.
Right.
So what we're going to do with the safety surveys is have conversations with principals. And then what we're going to do is same questions over time to see if the strongly agree and agree increases. And so the idea is that over time to try to get as close to 100% as possible for strongly agree and agree, or on the student survey to 100% to yes. So we'll have conversations of why do you think they answered this way? What are some things you think, students were thinking? When we suspend students, are there ways that we can treat students and parents with respect when students are disciplined? So having the conversation and coming up with possible strategies at the schools that adults can engage in order to greatly increase strongly agree, or yes on the student side over time. Because these surveys, as per the strategic plan, are supposed to be deployed annually to see growth.
I would personally prefer that this particular survey, at least for us to be able to improve as a board, I really think we need comments. I just do. If we get nothing back, then we're in the same position. But without any kind of context to this, you're talking about meeting with principals. We can't meet with principals. I mean, our constituents are an entire county.
Agreed.
So maybe some people that have kids in the school, maybe some people that don't have kids in the school.
Mm-hmm.
So, and I don't have any idea if that's who's filling out this survey, or I don't have any idea who these people are.
Mm-hmm.
So we have to be receptive to the entire county. And so I don't know how we're going to, I don't know how we have that opportunity to have feedback unless we want to start maybe rotating where we have our meetings. If we wanted to start going to each of the schools and having a chance to have a town hall type thing beforehand. If the board wants to look at these survey results. If we don't feel like that's worth our time, then I don't know why we have it in the strategic plan. Mr. Pennings.
I would be strongly against going to the schools and say starting at 5 o'clock like we used to do and wait for the meeting, because we sat there and twiddled our thumbs because you'd have one or two parents show up and they didn't even want to talk. So, I mean, it's a great idea, and I wish we had great participations in it, but we never have. Never.
All right. Well, seeing no other lights, I guess we will just move that on to the FYI, and we'll move on to the next item. Kind of informs it. So if you want to speak to that.
Gotcha. Yes. So in response to some of the board members jumping on email and asking, such as Mr. Moore was asking about this, I reached out to a company called the Panasonic Foundation. They have worked with school systems for the last 20 years or so on working on professional development to bring boards and superintendents closer together. So just wanting to gauge your feedback and your thoughts on, do we do this before the election? Do we do it after the election? Would you like to go with the Panasonic Foundation? Is there somebody else that we could bring in? What does the board, or what would the board like to do to move forward to kind of bring us closer together?
Any meeting of this board, not including the new board, I would think anything, if we have anything at all, it needs to be after the election. But I don't want to spend any money on bringing somebody in either. I mean, we had strategic planning. It's been a weekend doing that, and which I think was very beneficial. So I don't know what this would entail, but I think we're pretty close in election, so I think we need to have that discussion after that, if at all.
I will say that when we did the strategic plan, we had a half day that was left over that we've never used. And it may be that it would be beneficial at some point to use that to talk about what the expectations are for Dr. Marzak, so that he has a little bit more direction, particularly after the evaluation comes in. He may want us to follow up on this at the board meeting, and he may feel like the results of the evaluation tell him everything he needs to know, or maybe not. I'm not sure where that'll go, but I just think we have that as an option. I know I think the one time that maybe I felt like our board functioned reasonably well in some relative chaos was when Dave Braswell came in. But that was a very tedious process, and it was not cheap, I don't believe. So, but I think there are definitely some options, and I'm happy to work with the new board and the existing board right now, because I do think we have a lot of heavy lifting to do between now and the end of August with this existing board. Mr. Moore.
I think if we'd had this, kind of started looking at an outside person or firm 2 months ago, maybe working that would be appropriate. I'm really not always a fan of kind of waiting until after the election. I think you always run the risk of delaying everything we do because it's going to come up every 2 years, so it kind of puts us in a weird spot. But I think Chair Parker's idea of utilizing that half day we already have seems like something we could go ahead and pretty quickly or easily implement that doesn't cost us any extra money right now, and we probably need to do it anyway and continue planning for what maybe needs to happen after the election takes place.
Sounds good to me. Rebecca was a nice lady.
All right.
Yeah, I liked her.
Good deal. Do you want to reach out to her?
Be happy to.
Okay. Thank you. All right. Moving on. Is everybody good? We've been going for 2 hours. Thereabouts. Press on. All right. Policy, the next item is a request for a club at Spring Hill High School. Any questions on that? All right. Oh, I'm sorry. Ms. Morency?
I just had a question on that. They are a 501c3. They do understand that there's no, they cannot do anything politically. Because I read part of this and about this club, and in colleges, they're doing some things that are.
So, Mr. Wollover, correct me if I'm wrong, but students that want to start groups up, we can neither support them, we could also not deny them. So even though that this is a group turning point, and they do talk about politics on their website, because this is student-led, they have the right to organize and start the club. Correct, sir?
Yeah, that's right. If they cross the line on their tax exemption, then that's between them and the IRS.
Okay,
So
all right. As long as that we're not responsible for that.
All right. So I think we can move that to consent. Final adoption. Any questions about the discipline or the dress code? All right, so we can move that forward. Zoning and facilities. We've got some reports. Any of those that you want to speak to, Mr. Breeden?
Specifically, I've asked Owen Nevada with Train to be here tonight because there's several really important reports that they are delivering. So I'd like to spend our report time focusing on that if we could. The reports on our new schools are on there if anybody has any question. The team from Hewlett Spencer were going to be here tonight. They had another county they're working with that they really need to be at, and they asked me, they said they would come here if we need. I told them I thought this was probably a night they could miss and go to the other meeting. But really would want to spend some time talking about the stuff on the report from Train, if we could. And I'll call Mr. Votter, and Dave, if you'll switch me the screen, I'll try to refer if there's any of this stuff we need to refer to on here. I wonder if I can get you to come up and. I don't know what you've got, but I got the reports here. Okay, good. First thing is just your regular report. I don't know if you even want to speak to it.
Yeah, so really, that's just, if you all have any questions, the first one is just the update on, ongoing projects and where we're at. The second one is a kind of another version, a general report that we include that talks about projects that we have in development. Yeah, so I mean, the first two are purely just status reports. I guess I would just answer any questions that you may or may not have. Okay. And so I guess, Stan, the next one, I think I saw the power distribution systems. So as part of the work that we did earlier, we wanted to put together a set of specifications that Maury County Schools could use in securing electrical maintenance services for your main switchgear at all the facilities. And so we've got those specifications, and of course we would work with Stan and his team to secure those services when funding became available. We very much recommend it. It's you want to think of it this way. You guys have, ongoing in-house maintenance, and you have service contracts on your mechanical stuff. Mechanical stuff moves, and it needs, we'll say, more intense maintenance. But the electrical switchgear, it's stationary, and it sits there year after year after year. And unfortunately, too many times, the only time that it gets tested is when it needs to work. And so here recently we went through, we did electrical inspections, we found, breakers that didn't work, all sorts of things. And so we put this together. This is not something that, we would recommend that you contract through Train on an ongoing basis. This is something that we would help Stan and his team get the best value from an electrical contractor to do this work directly for the schools over time. I would definitely, if you have funds available in your budget, I would do it, and if not, I would definitely put it in your next budget. And we talked briefly, I'm estimating around $2,500 a site. So I don't know if there's any questions on that.
And let me just jump in, Owen, and say that when we got this information, we'd already developed the maintenance budget for this year, so we didn't include a figure for that. So we had proposed to possibly use, if we get some capital maintenance money, to do that for the first year out of it, because we think, you're talking about $2,500 a site. You're talking about $50,000 to $60,000 for an annual fee to bring in people who are used to dealing with high voltage commercial electricity. Our staff does some of that, but you're talking about doing some intense testing where you get into things like arc flash, 3,000 degree arc flash. You have to have special equipment to do that kind of stuff. We don't want anybody to get hurt, so we'd be talking about bringing an electrical contractor to basically go through and maintain, doing an inspection, an annual inspection of our electrical gear. Some of this is new to me. Electricity is not my specialty. Fortunately, I have a guy on our staff, Dave Hall, who's very much versed in electricity because he spent many years in that industry. But when he talks about breakers not working, we're not talking about the little 20-amp breakers like in your box at home. We're talking about a 250-amp breaker that won't kick. It freezes so that, they're supposed to shut off for a reason. And we went to one school and I think found 17 that were inoperable in a panel in one school because they just haven't been serviced over the years. It's just a service function. And so it's something we definitely need to add into our service repertoire. It's just continuing to take that evolutionary step of moving forward to be a much stronger maintenance department in how we maintain and care for our schools, the preventative maintenance kind of things that we've started doing over the last few years. So that's why we've asked Train, but we definitely think it's something we need to add into our cost. And that's how we would suggest doing that for the coming year.
Any questions on that? Okay. Next up. The high school?
Yes.
Oh.
Yes, Mount Pleasant High School.
Hey, we get to have a little fun with this. So before I get into the proposal, Stan asked me a specific question, and I went back to the guys and everything, and I was asking questions, and The answer was, well, other than a couple pieces of equipment that have been replaced because they failed, and the dedicated cooling units in the gymnasium, all the rest of that equipment is mid-1960s vintage equipment, but it's all Train. So there you go. Anyways, what we did at the high school, you guys may or may not remember, you authorized us to do preliminary design suitable for contract grade pricing on the engineering. We did that prior. The engineering that was done under a separate proposal, that engineering was completed. We took that engineering. We've walked with several different contractors and specialists through the facility, and we've put together a U.S. Communities compliant proposal that basically addresses really all of the remaining aging HVAC equipment. The good news is so you've got things like the chiller and pumps that are there. They don't need to be replaced. They're in good shape now. The piping system is in good shape. It needs some re-insulation in areas, things like that. But basically what you're talking about is you're talking about all the air handling devices, whether you're talking about the unit ventilators for the classrooms or the air handlers for the common area. It's basically all of the HVAC equipment that handles the air that conditions the school is scheduled to be replaced, along with the controls that control it. A quick and easy thing for you guys is if you go to page 2, right up near the top of page 2, where it says excludes the following HVAC equipment, and it also says see color-coded plans. And this gives you a real quick snapshot of what would not be included and the reason it's not. Okay, your boilers are already being replaced under a separate proposal. The chillers and pumps are in good condition. The library unit was replaced. The kitchen rooftop was replaced. The exhaust fans have been maintained by maintenance and don't need to be replaced. And of course, the mechatronics lab is being handled separately. And there is, at the very, very back, it will be hard to look at, but there's a color-coded set of floor plans that show the areas with a legend of basically these exclusions, and then also shows like the alternate for the domestic water heating system, and then the alternate for the 4 cooling only units in the gym. And those we broke out, just kind of cut to the chase. Yeah, might as well. We can back up and get into all kind of details if anyone wants, but basically you're looking at right at $1 million to replace all of the stuff in the school. We did the gym as an ad, and this was the kind of the humorous question. So the 4 cooling only units in the gym are 1993 vintage units, but they're working and they're not problematic. I mean, by any life cycle standards, they should be included and be replaced. But, you know, we said, okay, well, we'll break it out and show that separate. If you want to include it, you can include it. The only thing that's still in question is the domestic hot water heating system. And we've gone back and forth with that a number of times and recently conducted city water testing to determine real hardness levels and everything, because we've heard so many different things, and so there's different ways to go about heating the domestic water. Something you guys you may want to know, and you may want to take this into consideration in your homes, because this information is going to be different than anything you've heard in the past. So if you're like me, you know, like at home, you know, you want to set your water heater down kind of as low as you can set it and still be able to take warm showers and so on and so forth. But recent guidance that's come out from ASHRAE and being incorporated into codes, you actually want to store your hot water above 135 degrees to prevent the growth of Legionella. And so for commercial applications, and the schools obviously fall into commercial applications, they're now telling us to maintain water storage at 140 degrees. Well, in this particular school, when the school was built, It's a single temperature hot water delivery system for the entire school. And so, for instance, in your kitchens, you know, you want to be hitting the pot sinks with like 140 degree water, 130 to 140 degree water, but you only want to be hitting the labs and showers down around 105 to 110 to stay out of scalding issues. You could hit the labs and showers with higher temperature water, but you'd have to replace all the plumbing there and make sure that you had anti-scald devices. The right thing to do is to set that hot water distribution system up to protect everyone, the students, the teachers, yourselves, et cetera, from a scalding scenario, but also be able to provide high enough temperature water to the kitchen. So the way that you do that is through mixing valves and independent delivery systems. And so using traditional water heating equipment, you see that breakout there of 106,000, but that's because there's a whole lot of piping and valves and everything involved in that. That system would be modified, not just replaced. The thing that we're evaluating right now is whether or not instantaneous heat could be used effectively without creating more maintenance than it's worth. And so if you were to take any action, I would just say, let's not do anything there until we're able to totally finalize that one option. Because that price could come down on the domestic hot water heating. And then the only other thing I'll point out, I have no idea, you know, what your funding availability is or anything, and so all we're saying is if you're going to budget this for future years, I would just factor in about a 5% escalation. That's probably a little light for what we're seeing going on right now, but I'm thinking like if it's a year or two down the road, it should settle back out. You know, other than material indexes and cost of money and everything keeps going up, but there's this glut of work in Middle Tennessee, and that's what's forcing the pricing up. Quite frankly, we're seeing 8 to 10% escalations, and it's hard to keep up with. But that can't stay that way forever, you know, or shouldn't. You wouldn't think. So I'm just saying, just make sure that if you can't fund it, that you allow for escalation over time.
And if I could speak to that just briefly while you're there, to say that this is the next big HVAC replacement job that we feel like as a district. You know, we've done other schools. Last year we did Mount Pleasant Middle, we did Woodard. Those two schools got fully upgraded. We did most of the equipment at Culleoka has been upgraded. 2 or 3 years ago we did Whitthorne Middle School. Has been replaced. Those systems don't last forever. You know, I'm in this same dilemma at home. I have a 20-year-old package air conditioning unit sitting outside my house, and I know it's going to die any day, and I'm trying to decide, do I wait till it dies on July the 15th when it's 115 degrees and my wife's going, I'm hot, or do I go ahead and replace it now? You know, those sort of things, but we know they've got to be replaced. This is what we would be looking for. This was all identified in the EMG. Now, EMG actually looked at it component by component, spread it out over 2 or 3 years, but it would make more sense to do it all at the same time. But, you know, if funding becomes available, this may be a summer of 2019 project. It's too late to do it in 2018, but because it would have to be done during the summer when school's out. But again, depending on the funding we get, so we're not recommending it for approval tonight because we don't have any money to do it with. But once the money's available, we wanted you to go ahead and be aware this is kind of one of the things on the horizon.
Any questions?
I don't have any. I guess the only question I would have would be staying all these items then, would you just want them to be moved to FYI because they're all kind of contingent upon
They are,
having
yes.
funding?
Yeah, so these reports that he's making to you are all FYI information.
Okay.
Yeah, that's why we put them on reports. Now, we've got one a little bit later we're going to recommend to as a bid that we do have funding for.
Okay. Sounds good. Thank you.
So, okay.
Any other questions?
If you give the pipe report, I think's the next one.
Okay.
Just because that deals with the bid,
the one-
deals with the bid we're gonna recommend just a little bit later.
Yeah, so I'm not gonna bore you guys with reading all of this stuff, and what I'll do is just kind of summarize it like we did in a one-page summary. So when we did the ultrasonic pipe testing, the whole idea was we needed to get a handle on the wall thickness of the piping throughout the school, basically the existing piping infrastructure, to know whether we had a piping infrastructure system that was worth consideration for reuse or whether we should just completely abandon it. Basically what the report came back and said is the integrity of the piping system is fine, provided it's properly cleaned and re-insulated. Where the issues are at the mechanical joints. The mechanical joints would be replaced as part of an equipment replacement anyways. And so, like I explained to Stan, that doesn't necessarily mean that we would advocate that you go back with the same type of a system, but what it does is it leaves that on the table as an option. And so the engineering proposal that I guess we'll get to at some point is for us to do a cost versus benefit analysis of all the different types of systems that could be installed using, not using, or partially using the existing hydronic piping at each location. And so we've included that in the engineering proposal so that we could come back kind of like the Mount Pleasant High School and give you guys, okay, here's what it's really going to cost to replace the system. Here's what we recommend. This would be the configuration. And again, then it would be up to you as the timing, you know, as to when you wanted to fund that. So, anything else? Any questions about that?
I'll just ask if, after the services are done, cost-wise, probably looking at something similar to the cost of Mount Pleasant, or
so.
Both are both are smaller buildings.
Yeah, so, okay, so we gotta be careful here. Yeah, so like, the middle school that we just did, and we only did part of it, was, you know, $600,000 more. And actually, when the numbers started coming in on Mount Pleasant High School, you know, I raised the question about, that doesn't sound like enough money for a school that size. And then I got reminded that, well, the chillers have been replaced before, the boiler's being replaced now separately. And so I want to be careful about doing dollars per foot assumptions and things like that. I would think the two schools in question, because of sheer size, would be, you know, significantly less money. We do have the ventilation thing that we have to get through with the state fire marshal's office, and that is the one thing that can drive the cost way up. And so that's why we want to look at all those various options as to what can be done, you know, without basically throwing a hand grenade into it and starting over. So, but you would think, because I mean they're much smaller.
And so, Stan, from a priority standpoint, EMG-wise, could this potentially be covered in that 14 million?
It possibly could, because both of those schools are in the items that were identified in the first 3 years. All three of these schools were
Okay.
in the EMG list in the first 3 years.
And the follow-up reporting that we did.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, yeah, most likely they would be covered in that.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions from the board members?
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Stan, did you want to say anything on the project cost report?
Unless you all have questions. It's just the update that what we normally give.
All right. Engineering services for
And-
those schools, which we
and,
just
yeah,
talked
that-
about.
That is the bid that we just mentioned, that they authorizing them. There is money in the current capital funds that we have to do this engineering for these two schools. So this is funds that we currently have in the still $16 million bond we're working out of. So we'd be talking about a total of, for the, well, you see, we spread it out. We actually are not using it all from the bond. I forgot, we've got some money left from the original energy audit upgrades we did when we did the $4 million project with Train. We got a little bit of money left there. We got a little bit of money left in the Whitthorne Middle School HVAC project, and the rest we would take out of the bond fund. So $48,866, but we break it up amongst those three funds to kind of use those up. So we're recommending that bid this time to the board.
Any objections from board members? Present. All right, you move that to consent.
Okay.
Close out on the roofing.
Yeah, the next one I'm really excited to tell you. First of all, we have had a tremendous experience with Rinks Engineering on the roof projects we did that we've just finished at Whitthorne Middle School, total roof replacement, partial roof replacement at Culleoka, and roof repairs at Woodard. We are very impressed with those guys. We're impressed with the work that they designed, but also the fact that they are the ones who manage the jobs. They were out there with the contractors almost weekly. And Dave Hall said, if those contractors didn't get done right, those guys stayed on them. And so we really think that's the right way to go with roofs. In those jobs, you'll see we ended up with a total savings when we came back, because there was contingency in each job. So we finished up with $103,040.45 left over. When we finished those three, you can see what the total cost came in on those. What we are recommending is that we have the next two roofs that we really need to look at. First one is Mount Pleasant Middle School. We've talked about the leak issues there. They've given us a $7,000 proposal to do the engineering work to fix that one. I don't know if the rest of the money will do that or not, but we hope so, that it'll do the repairs that we'd need to do that roof. We also would like to go ahead and hire them. We've asked them for a proposal. We don't have it for you tonight. We hope to have it next month, to do an engineering report on Spring Hill High School, because that's the next one it needs to. And we have some people who said it needs to be replaced, and whether it needs to be replaced or repaired, I prefer for them to tell us that. So we're recommending that you go ahead and authorize this $7,000 to begin this engineering, but let us go ahead and designate this money that's left over from these three roofing projects to go ahead and start attacking first Mount Pleasant Middle School and then Spring Hill High School.
Mr. Benny?
Yeah, I think it's real important to have them look at Spring Hill, because you were at the county budget meeting. You know how much it was pushed to replace Spring Hill High School's roof. And if we can get a reputable company to say, look, it doesn't have to be replaced, it would be a good boost for us. And I think they said, what, $265,000 they were giving us to replace the roof, or they wanted to?
No, sir, it's over $1 million. I think it's $1,265,000 was an estimate that I think it was a rough estimate that Hewlett Spencer had given them after looking at based on square footage.
Right.
It was over $1 million. I don't remember the exact number, but yes, sir.
So your recommendation on this was to take those remaining funds and allocate those towards Mount Pleasant Middle. Are you saying?
And at least pay for an engineering report for Spring Hill High School.
Okay.
Those two things.
Those two things.
Well, pay for this engineering report for Mount Pleasant Middle, and then any work they'd recommend, and go ahead and do an engineering report for Spring Hill High School.
So 2 engineering reports and the balance to be used on Mount Pleasant Middle.
We won't know. Once they do the engineering report, they can give us a recommendation on what they think we should budget for the cost.
Okay. Is everybody good with that plan? All right. Let's move that to consent too. Bell and Associates is the next item.
Remember a few years ago when we did the Whitthorne Middle School project, we authorized Train to do basically a tax rebate, the energy allocation 179D. It's really not available to the school district. It's only available to contractors who build, but we have to give them our authorization to apply for this tax rebate that they can get for building an energy efficient school. And Bell has approached us, sent us the paperwork. They feel like what they did qualifies for that. So they would have to go through the application process, but we have to sign off on it. And so I spoke with Mr. Williver, and he felt like that needed board approval to do that. And if he has anything to add, there's a copy of that allocation request in there. So we just be given Bell authorization to be able to apply for this tax refund. It's available to the contractor. It's really not available to the school district.
But we're not certifying that we know that it's are we making any kind of certification other than they get to go ahead and get the investigation? No, just that they would be a proper party to apply for the benefit. Okay. Any objections? Can move that to consent.
Am I skipping over? Yeah, the next one is sidewalk Spring Hill High School. I really appreciate Mr. Phil Bennett from Spring Hill Church of Christ being here and waiting patiently this evening. We've been in conversation with them because we both have a parking problem. They have a parking problem on Sunday morning, Wednesday nights. We have a parking problem during the school day. We just don't have enough parking space. If you've ever been to Spring Hill Elementary in the daytime, you know people park all over the grass there. So what they've proposed, they tried to do a parking lot, build a parking lot. Unfortunately, the city didn't give them, they ran into a lot of roadblocks with the city on that, of what they were going to require them to do. So now they're proposing to build a sidewalk to join their parking lot to ours so that our teachers could park in their parking lot during the daytime and kind of free up our parking spaces. It would come right to a place where we can set up an entry spot. The teachers can enter with their cards. We'll have to add that to that door, and we're working on putting that together. But, and then we would sign an MOU with them that during their service times, they would have the right to use the parking area. So it's kind of a trade-off for them building the sidewalk and paying for the cost of that. And so we're recommending that to you, but Mr., I don't know if you want to share anything or answer any questions or.
I'm here. If you can't hear me, I don't need a microphone, but I do have some directions to belt on. So if you need them, I'll be glad to get them to you. But no, I'm glad to answer any questions at all. We are landlocked. You guys have us cut off on the south, and private citizens have us cut off on the north, and so we're cut off. We did try to pave the front part of the elementary school, and unfortunately, the city of Spring Hill did not deem that a viable option. We certainly hope that you will approve this. We think that it will be beneficial. We have approximately 25 to 30 of your teachers and staff who currently, and have for years, parked there, and we have absolutely no problem with that whatsoever. Our insurance coverage does cover any accidents that might happen while they are in our parking lot, and so that's taken care of. We try to be good neighbors to you. We are a part of the jetpack program, and so we fund and handle those jetpacks and deliver them to the school, and anything else that we can do to be good neighbors. So we are asking you to approve this. If you don't have a drawing, I've got some.
There's one in their packet.
One in their packet, okay.
Yes,
And any questions, should holler them and I'll answer them.
Mr. Moore?
I just had a question for Stan on this. This cause any kind of issues with, I know we have other uses at the school. Is there a church service at the school as well?
There is not a church that currently uses the
Oh, okay.
school. This would probably make it not a very
Okay.
attractive for a church in the future, but currently we do not have a church that uses the school.
I just wanted to make sure that the school, if
Yes.
they're managing that, that's fine. Good.
And I will tell you that we have checked with our insurance agent. We would be able to issue them a certificate of insurance, and we would expect the same, and that's all addressed in the MOU, and Mr. Wolliver's reviewed that as well, so.
Sounds good. Sounds like a consent item to me. All right. Thank you very much. Appreciate all that you do for our schools.
Does that mean I can go home?
Yes, sir, you can go home. We hope to be following you. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. The next item is something we really probably should have had on here in May, though we've got enough funds to kind of get us through June, but this is out of the capital money that you've already allocated, but this is what we would spend for our summer work crew and purchase of paint for the summer painting we're doing in our schools, and we just need you to approve this. We actually will not, the paint, we'll go ahead and be issuing the PO now, but the money for the crew, we have to wait till after we start the new fiscal year, and then we'll be doing the transfer. So it'll be there to do. We've got the money in the funds now to do the payroll for the month of June, but we'd need to do that transfer to do the payroll for the month of July. So we're just asking for you to make that approval. We'll bring a budget amendment back in July when we start the new year for that transfer of funds for that payroll.
Do you need that? You don't
We
need that
would need
until
for
the-
you to approve the PO for the paint.
Okay, but the budget amendment doesn't have to be done before June 30th.
Well, it doesn't. It's a July budget,
Okay.
yeah.
Okay.
Thank you, guys. Yeah, it is not it's a fiscal year 18-19 budget amendment, not a
Okay.
17-18.
Good deal.
So we'll bring it back then.
All right. Seeing no lights, it looks like this can be a consent item as well. Then the RFP. Instructions.
Yes, we had talked to you about issuing an RFP because looks like, as some of the board members reported, there may be the opportunity to get some funding for at least design. And we would, having gone through this process now on the Battle Creek schools, we feel very good about having the construction management team involved in the design process. They get a lot of the value engineering done, a lot of back and forth between them and the architect. We felt, I'll tell you, that's where Hewlett Spencer really earns their money. Now, they did some really good things at Central, but it's very challenging when they walked in, the building was already designed. But seeing what they've done, meeting with the team of ESA through this process, design these schools, really sold me on their process. But anyway, so we put out the RFP. We had 3 proposals submitted. Whoops, sorry. I was trying to close that, not open it. Email popped in. But we had 3 proposals that you see that came in. Barton Malo, DeAngelis Diamond, and Hewlett Spencer. We've given you those. Obviously, it's your choice, not ours, but based on the services that they gave, DeAngelis Diamond didn't give any references for schoolwork whatsoever. Barton Malo gave 1 school. They're actually currently building a school in Rutherford County, but that's the only school in Tennessee that they had built. I understand they're an office that's opened sometime in the last few years. They're in both those companies, DeAngelis Diamond and I think that's how you say it, DeAngelis Diamond, Barton Malo, are national companies that have a local office in Nashville. And then, of course, Hewlett Spencer, who we have worked with, and they gave a broad resume, as you can see in their packet, of schools that we've worked all across Tennessee, school districts. So we would recommend to extend the work with Hewlett Spencer through this RFP for the next projects that we do.
All right. Seeing no lights, is this something we can put on consent? All right. Sounds good.
I'm through, Dave, if you want to switch back.
I think we can probably get through these next ones in the next 30 minutes, if that's okay.
Oh, yeah.
Or-
If you don't mind, could we keep that one separate for the meeting?
Okay.
I just want to make sure we don't gloss through that one too quickly. It's kind of a pretty big decision, and I think it's worth at least its own vote and maybe a few minutes to talk.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right. Next item, Power School Learning Management System. Are you speaking of that, Ms. John?
Any questions? Provided a thoroughly detailed rationale, and then also sent out information that you would have requested. I sent that out later in the week last week concerning the payment and where that came from. So if you have any questions.
All right, seeing no lights, I guess we can move that one to consent. All right, some CTE products. I don't see Dr. Brown here. Any questions about those equipment purchases?
If you have any questions, get them to me. Just found out that she's having a grandbaby tonight, a month early. So she ran to the hospital. So if you have any questions, just get them to me. I'll get them to Dr. Brown, and she can get you the responses. That's why she's not here tonight.
Is this something that y'all feel okay moving to consent though, or are there questions about these purchases? It's okay to move it at this point. Okay. Moving on, teaching strategies. Any questions about that? All right, we can move that to consent. Arts Commission. Any questions on that? And so, is that our portion or is that all grant money?
All grant money.
Okay. And our portion of that is only for teachers' pay. Is that correct, under that grant?
What do you mean teacher pay?
I thought that was the teacher match.
No. No, it's just professional development. It's to train 30 teachers a year, and that's all funded by the Tennessee Arts Commission. There's no local match.
There's no local match?
No, ma'am. No.
I thought Dr. Woodard said that our portion, the match, was just teacher salaries that would be teaching under the.
Oh,
Crayola
teachers
grant.
going through the training, yeah. Then that would be, if you want to look at it that way, yeah. Yes, ma'am.
So is this professional development being done during the school year then?
Happened during the summer?
It's supposed to start this summer.
Okay. Happens during the summer. See what you
Okay.
put on here.
So we won't be paying subs
No, ma'am.
for any.
Not as far as I know. I've not been real involved in this, so I don't want to speak to out of turn, but I do know that they were supposed to be training, I think, this summer and then each summer thereafter. I don't want to tell you that there wouldn't be anything that happened during the school year.
Can you check on that and get back to us on it? Because that's,
Absolutely.
So it looks like third paragraph down on the letter, it says that the grants will cover registration fees, dorm accommodations if applicable, and mileage for school sending teachers. I don't see anything about stipends. I think this may be a voluntary, and I believe Dr. Woodard's already gotten teachers to volunteer to do it. So I don't see anything about providing stipends. We'll follow up with him just to be 100% sure.
okay. All right, can move on to the buy board. Any questions on that one?
We have one before that, 6.1 renewal of insurance.
Oh, I'm sorry.
That's okay.
I'm looking at an old one.
We just
Yeah,
received
and that's
that
the one
today.
I
Sorry
added
about that.
today. I
No, I
apologize.
apologize.
We just received it. It's gotta
That
be done by
we
July
just
1.
got that this afternoon. And that's our annual renewal. We thought we were gonna have that, and it just came in today, but it renews July the 1st. All of this is, the only one that's actually an increase in premium, I think, well, all of them are within the budgets that we had submitted for next year's budget. All of them are less than we budgeted for this year, with the exception of work comp. It's about $7,000 more, so we'll have to go back and adjust that budget in the budget documents that have yet to be approved. But this is still substantially less than we were paying a couple of years ago before we rebid with this company. So we did have a little bit of increase in automobile insurance because we've added more buses. So our premium went up from about 83,000 to 94,000 this year. But everything else is very much in line, and the work comp's actually less. We paid 302,000 this year in work comp, so this is less because work comp rates went down, but it's a little more than they had projected when they gave us the budget numbers. They projected 291, and it came in at 298. So we're gonna have to adjust the budget a little bit, but we do need to renew this July 1, or we don't have any insurance. So we need your approval to do that.
Any questions on any of the amounts? All right, we can move that to consent as well. Buy board.
Buy board's a buying cooperative that's actually TSBA recommended to us. We've investigated. We think we could use a lot, especially in the computer area of purchases. So, but in order to use it, we have to join. So this is the recommend approval to join Buy board, which you would just approve. And there's a copy of a brochure and the contract there that we would be joining under. And really the same thing, if I can move right on to save time, into tips. It's a similar kind of one. We're recommending it because we actually have a bid we'd like to buy under tips, but we can't buy that unless you approve it of some refurbished laptops. So we're recommending both these as cooperative purchasing groups that we would join to be able. And again, with cooperative purchasing, basically you're using bids that have already been done through a national buying cooperative. And so you're getting bid prices. It meets the state procurement laws. It's, but it allows us to do that without having to go through an advertised bid process when we find a product that is at a good price that we need.
Any questions about these cooperative agreements? So we can move those all to consent. And then I guess that you already mentioned why you wanted to do one of them. So
Yes.
unless there's any questions on the refurbished laptops, we can move that to consent as well.
And that is from 17-18 funds that we'd be buying that from. We do have that money left in our budget. And that's to refurbish some computer labs using the same device that students are using under the diploma program. We're just buying some refurbished ones for the computer labs. Buying them straight out.
Any questions? Seeing no lights, we can move that to consent. And everything else is just FYI. All right, so I think we're ready to adjourn unless anybody has anything else they want to add tonight. Thank y'all for coming.